Hi everyone, welcome to the Elendi Files, where we navigate the complexities of the global regulatory landscape of medical products. Our goal is to help make global medical product regulations accessible to everyone. So whether you're a manufacturer, intermediary, regulatory specialist, or CEO of a MedTech startup, you're in the right place. Be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and our website, ElendiLabs.com. This is Teddy, the General Manager of ElendiLabs. At ElendiLabs, we're all about connecting clients, be it medical product manufacturers, medical startups, biotech startups, with the right regulatory expertise to get a product to people faster. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Maria from ETMP Consultancy, a firm that helps to navigate the complexities of the EU market. We're going to be spending some time learning more about the regulation landscape in the EU, and we will also focus on one case study from ETMP Consultancy. And Maria, thanks for being here to kick things off. Could you give us a brief introduction of what ETMP Consultancy specializes in?
Thank you for inviting me. So my name is Maria. I'm running a company called ETMP Consultancy. It's a company who provides consultancy services, regulatory and quality consultancy services to the companies who needs to design and develop, and then to place on the market medical devices. So we help medical devices manufacturers to meet the requirements of the different regulations around the globe, especially the MDR or FDA. We provide our expertise from help writing the regulatory strategy, like guidance and supporting during all stages of product development in different stages, milestone 1 to milestone 3, milestone 3 to milestone 5, or placing on the market. During all the stages of product development, as I said, to review product technical file documentation for obviously a successful product registration, including the help with the registration, like MHRA registration, UDAMED registration, getting in contact for manufacturer, getting in contact with economic operators and creating a connection and having a good communication for set up their access to the European market. If you are outside of the European market, like the UK or any other, like Switzerland, where you need different economic operators like EU representative or importers in order to place your device on the market. Yeah.
So ETMP Consultancy is not just limited to compliance in the EU, but also the UK and the US, and then it also provides not just the registration work, but also end-to-end support, regulatory support.
Yeah, so to be honest, I worked not only through the registration in EU or Switzerland or FDA. So I also work with like Canada registration, Australia registration, New Zealand, South America countries like Argentina, Paraguay, Mercosur countries, as well the Arabs countries like the Emirates. So I had like touched a lot of registration, and I had to do some different like jobs and tasks for the registration, to find information about what you need, to place a device on the Emirates, or on I don't know, Jordanian market, Qatar market, Oman market, Australia. So all these, I had like researched and giving information for all these countries, like half of the world, to be honest.
But so you can provide these services with
like strategies about what to do to market your device on those territories. With the South America is quite simple, because they have a Mercosur regulations provision, how they call it, and those regulations are adopted in all the countries which are part of Mercosur, like Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Uruguay, Paraguay. All these countries are part of Mercosur, so they have kind of unique law, the same as MDR, goes on the same as MDR, and then it's transposed in their national legislation.
So the countries they share a common.
Yeah, exactly like MDR. How MDR function like we have MDR and then the regulation, MDR regulation, it's transposed in the national country, in the national law of all the country, France, Germany, Spain. So they transpose the MDR in their national law, and it's adopted in all these countries. Of course, there are few countries they have some extra things when it's about registration, like Spain, Italy, Greece. They have specific alongside with the MDR, so they accept CE marking, but alongside with that, they need to do some extra bits when it's about registration. So in the same way, Mercosur kind of work like MDR.
So yeah, it seems like MDR is like the basis for so many countries, like foundation.
That's true. It is wholly accepted by a lot of country, like the Mercosur country. But you still, because this is one of the mistake a lot of company does. They believe they have, if they have CE marking, it's enough to actually place their devices on this country. But in reality, it's not, because these all countries, and the same with the Arab country, the same with the South America country, alongside with the CE marking, which that's true. If you have a certificate of free sales, if you find the registration holder in those countries, because you need the registration holder in those countries, you can't do registration. You as a legal manufacturer, you can't do it. You have to find somebody, authorized representative in those countries. But you think if you find the importer authorized representative and you have CE marking with the certificate of free sale, it's enough. But unfortunately, that's one of the mistakes all the legal manufacturers they do, because it's not enough. They have their own quality management system. They have their own vigilance procedure. They have their own procedure when it's about complaints, customers' complaints, like CAPAs. So it's a little bit more advanced, let's say it, especially because most of these countries, they have their own quality management systems. So you have to make sure your quality management system, which is usually adopted 13485, align with their particular quality management system, which are captured within their legislation, the law, And it's not only that. So in the South America countries and Arab countries, I observed that it's not only one law. They have multiple laws, for different things. Like they have a law for vigilance, they have a law for quality management system, they have a law for registration, cancellation, modification of the registration, they have a law for marketing, they have a law for quality management systems. So it's a complex. It's not like MDR. MDR has everything in one place. That's in Europe. But in all the other countries, they have multiple law legislation which cover everything, like the whole medical devices kind of industry. So it's a bit, how to say, it's not complicated, but it's not alone for a legal manufacturer without regulatory to make them, to highlight that, look, by having CE marking and certificate of free sale, it doesn't give you access to those markets. It's a little bit more you have to do, like a proper engage a regulatory, like a consultant or within your department, because a lot of companies, they have their own regulatory compliance department. Involve your regulatory compliance department, and they will advise you what to do to be compliant. Because in the end of the day, you'll do whatever sales team says to do it. You will go there. You will give like the minimum documentation which your importer asks you to do, or registration holder. But then on the first inspection from the competent authority, you will fail, because you will not be able to provide all the relevant requirements, and then they will stop selling your product, and you might be fine as well. So it's a bit of not like overseeing and making sure you follow the requirements and you understand. It's not only following. following and understanding the requirements of each country you want to place, because now here we are talking about medical devices, and the safety of the patient is the
top
main
yeah.
focus on for those countries where you sell it. So in the end of the day, the patient needs to be safe, protected by the medical devices which you are selling. So that's the key part everyone needs to understand. Like I said, I was doing a lot of this type of registration and understanding the legislation from a lot of countries, like South America, as I said, Arab countries and Africa countries. So complex. It's very complex. It's not that simple.
Yeah. Thank you for your detailed explanations of the regulations of other countries. But today we will focus on the EU. So since you just mentioned the EU is the foundation for most countries, could you give us a general overview of how it's like to go through from the entire compliance process, from obtaining the CE mark and then registration in the ETMP, and then any post-market surveillance activities?
So overall, the same process is different. Let's say different countries, they might have different processes to achieve the design and development, and then to be able to place on the market. So now we focus on the European UK FDA. I would say they follow the same design and development phase, and then carry on with the part to placing on the market. So only these countries, because other countries, they might have, like China, India, they might have different how to say requirement when it's about design and development. So we will focus only in these three countries, where like UK, Europe, and FDA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, actually they follow the same concepts. Only that Canada, New Zealand, FDA, they might have some small thing, but not too many, because we have CE marking. I mean, I've worked with the CE marking products, which have been sold easy on the Australia and New Zealand, and the US. So it's not that complicated. But let's focus on the European, UK, and US. So let's say you start with an idea. You have an idea. So we call that milestone 1. So usually in the design and development, I'm not an expert in design and development. I understand the process, and I do review documentation, and I do give advices, but I'm not an expert in design and development work. I'm just reviewing from regulatory perspective if it's okay to be able to go for the one milestone to another milestone, taking into account the regulatory aspects, of the project. So if I see something that is wrong and is not okay, I can say, look, this is wrong. You have to go back to the legislation, because we don't work only with the 1345. So this is something that everyone needs to understand. So when you decide and start the project, you don't work only with the 1345. I understand that design and development and the whole design and development, it's focusing on the 1345, but it's not only 1345. We need to take into consideration the regulation of where in the country you are selling. If it's Europe, we take into account the MDR regulation, 207/745. Even though the regulation doesn't give you too much, detail about the design and development, but you still have Article 10 from the regulation, which it gives you details about what you need, and Annex 2, which is the technical file requirements. So you have to be also, so you have to fulfill two things, 1345 and Annex 2 of MDR. Yeah. So starting with the idea, obviously, then you have that we call that milestone 0, because you have a concept idea. The concept idea can come from the clinicians, yeah, can come from, I don't know, the owner who is a doctor or something, yeah. And that is the milestone 0, when we have the idea and we explore idea, we look into the requirements and to think if it's achievable and so on. Then we have the milestone, the whole project itself, depending, it's different from a company to company. But most of the company, they call milestone or stages, whatever, milestone 1 or stage 1 or stage 2, stage 3, and so on. We say at milestone 1 to milestone 7, or milestone 1 to milestone 8, and then you split them, but you might have 3 milestone, 4 milestone, 5 milestone, depending on how much work you want to do within those milestones. So for example, in the milestone 1, you start with the requirement specification, you open documents, you give documents numbers, you define the intended use of your device. You create a project timeline, of course, because you need to understand how long the project will take. Yeah, you have to give a date, a proposed date, initially proposed date, because in time you might find out that you have to delay the project because it's not it doesn't work everything how you proposed, because it's delayed because of the subcontractors, because of the staff, you have less staff, because of situation like COVID. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? So there are so many situations where you can delay. So that's the milestone 1. As I said, you conduct your first project review, you start your initial project risk assessment, you create your project timeline, you develop product requirement, design specification, as I said. So that's the milestone 1. Then after you identify all these, what you have to do, and you identify your intended use, you identify your product requirements, your design specification, you approve your project plan, obviously. So you start with an idea, you share it, and then you approve. You approve your project plan, you approve your design controls, you have your quality documentation structure in place, yeah, documents which you have to fill in the next milestones. So then you have the milestone 2, which is the concept development and design planning, yeah. In this milestone, it's just kind of, obviously, I'm just summarize. We don't have time to go through everything. We're just going at a detail. We just summarize what you need to do. For example, for MDR, you initiate the GSPR, which is a really important document which will go forward to all the milestones, because this can be completed in a one stage, because you have to have information, evidence of all the verification, testing verification, clinical evaluation, clinical investigation, biological evaluation. So this GSPR, which is an important document, because this document is actually give you evidence of everything you do. So this you initiate now, and you will complete it in the last milestone when you have all the documents, including the clinical evaluation and clinical investigation. So that's prior to release to manufacturing. So the GSPR. It's a very complex document. It's very important document because, again, I say, capture all the evidence you need for your technical file. So then you start your design inputs, design outputs, you start looking to the packaging and labeling requirements with the IFU evaluation, packaging evaluation, looking to the regulation. Again, you see, this is the situation where packaging and labeling evaluation is not necessarily aligned with 1345. It's aligned with the law, which the law is MDR. So when you start packaging and labeling assessments, you look to the MDR, which is the GSPR Annex 1, yeah, where the Annex 1 gives you the Chapter 23, it gives you IFU and labeling, yeah, so you have to transpose that in one of your documents calling IFU and packaging evaluation. And then you look, obviously, from other perspective, like the type of packaging, what type of packaging we want. We want to be You look to the sterilization. Is it going to be a single use? Is it going to be sterile? Is it going to be non-sterile? So you are assessing all this information, but again, this is details, yeah? So then you continue your risk management. You need to initiate the usability and user interface. You start performing user-related risk analysis, generate obviously the drawings, yeah, engineering drawing and parts list. You need to start looking what parts does your device needs, yeah. You complete the form. You can start the formative and you can complete the formative usability planning. You develop manufacturing plans, you select suppliers and subcontractors. It's the time to look to the supplier and subcontractors you are going to work. You start to evaluate them. You start looking for supplier and evaluating them. Again, this can go to the next milestone. Yeah. You conduct material dimensional tolerance assessment, perform initial safety risk assessment, and then after all the design is ready and you think it's ready, you can freeze the design concepts. Yeah, only the concept of the design. Yeah. Then we have the milestone 3. Yeah, in the milestone 3, we start the development verification. Yeah, like we start looking to the material evaluation. Yeah, so you have to understand your material, which is really important. Again, we have to go back to the GSPR, yeah, because the GSPR will link, yeah, the GSPR will link into the material evaluation. So you can't do the material evaluation without doing the GSPR. It's a no-no. Yeah, you can't do it because the GSPR will inform you where to look to the materials, to the subcontractors. Yeah, do you have the statements from your subcontractor suppliers? Do you have statements for phthalates, nanomaterials, CMRs? You know, so and all these are in the GSPR. So you can't fulfill the GSPR, you can't complete the GSPR, yeah, without making sure you get all this information from your supplier. So that's why the material evaluation is a really important part of the technical file, like really important part. And these need to be highlighted as a high-risk document, because if you can't provide evidence to your notified body during the technical file review that your material is safe, is free from nanomaterials or CMRs in the particular requirements, you can't go further. You can't. So the material evaluation need to go bone to bone, back to back with the biological evaluation, with statements, data safety sheets from the subcontractor suppliers. Without this, you will not be able to complete the technical file. That's for sure. Even if you think, okay, we will do a superficial one, a notified body will ask you. I know, I've seen it. Yeah. So the notified body, they will look into your material evaluation. They will scrutinize your technical file about the material and statements. They will want you to give them the statements to see. They want to see those statements from the supplier. So material evaluation documents, it's really important documents to have. Yeah. And then we have the biological evaluation. As I said, it's imperious, like important like the material evaluation. Biological evaluation, again, they will give you all the information you need to a notified body to understand if your device is safe from material perspective, leachable, extractable, and so on. And then we start to develop product specification. We start to develop a test strategy. So we are on the step where we need to understand what your test strategy is, what verification, what test verification you are going to plan. Then we have the design verification tooling. We start to develop shelf life and transportation testing protocols. We begin IFU evaluation. We plan sterilization and sterilization validation activities. We start to develop process validation strategy. We continue the risk management with the GSPR, with the usability, with the design input, and design the manufacturing line and initiate product documentation. So I can stay with you like a whole day like a whole day to explain all these in more details, but because we don't have details, and we don't have time, I can't stay with you to give too much details about all these processes. So then on a milestone 4, it comes the design freeze. So on the design freeze and validation preparation, what we do, we, exactly what the name says, we freeze the design. We are not going to do any changes, only if it's really critical to do, because our risk shows that we have high risk and we can't mitigate, and then we need to change the design. Yeah. But now we are on the milestone 4, where we say the design freeze stays like this. So we freeze the design and we say the design now it's like this. This is how I propose my device to stay like this, and we don't do any changes. We, exactly like we say, we freeze the design. So here we complete the use specification, because we have to. We are in the middle of the stages, so we have to complete the use specification. We build the manufacturing line, we finalize the validation strategy and protocol, we complete the biological evaluation, we continue with the sterilization validation, because this takes a while. We continue the IFU development, we continue with the risk management, the GSPR. This is the time when we initiate the clinical investigation planning if is required. So if according to the MDR, the clinical investigation is mandatory, but you are exempt under the Article 61A if you can provide enough information and it's sustainable by the clinical evaluation. So you have enough real clinical data to sustain your device. Like, for example, you go to FDA first, and you have real clinical data from the market, post-market, surveillance. So that clinical data will sustain your clinical evaluation. So having a clinical evaluation completed with enough literature search and with enough real clinical data will give you an exemption from the clinical investigation. Or a clinical investigation might be exempt for the low-risk devices, but not because it's a low-risk device doesn't mean you don't have to do clinical investigation. Again, a misconception by everyone, thinking that if it's a low-risk device, I don't need to do a clinical investigation. Wrong. MDR says that you have to have real clinical data for all medical devices, even regardless of their classes. Yeah, but if you look and you claim Article 61, which says the Article 61 is the exemption from the clinical investigation, you have to follow those requirements. It's like you can't have claims, or you have enough clinical evaluation, a complex clinical evaluation to show that the literature and the studies which are already suffice. So you have to have a broader clinical evaluation to sustain your claims that you don't need a clinical investigation, So in case you need a clinical investigation, this is the time when you can start it, You initiate the device and packaging verification testing, and you complete the design freeze. That's the milestone 4. So then we go to the milestone 5, which is the process validation and usability validation. This is something that the quality usually does. This is part of the quality need to validate their processes. So they validate production processes, manufacturing line, validate the product, manufacture validated products, continue design verification testing, completing packaging verification, initiate self-life and transportation studies, which usually these are done with third parties. So you have to engage subcontractors to help you with the transportation testing, You can initiate the shelf life testing, you complete sterilization validation, you finalize IFU, you complete the summative usability validation, you complete usability engineering documentation, you continue the risk management, and you initiate device master DMR, device master record. So then we have milestone 6. In case you need a clinical investigation, you have to prepare everything needed. So prior to the clinical investigation, again, I'm saying to everyone that clinical investigation, so when you have clinical investigation and you have to prepare the clinical investigation for MHRA or for a competent authority in European Union, you have to have everything. So your GSPR need to be completed. You have to demonstrate that your device is safe to be used with patients, because now we are going to the next stage. We are going to the human, using on human. So we have human trials. Yeah. So your device need to be safe to be used on human. So what that means? That means that in this milestone 6, you have to have everything ready. Yeah. You have to show that your device is safe to be used with the patient. The only thing which is missing for the clinical investigation, and again, I'm just saying to everyone to understand, the only documents which would be accepted by being missing from a MHRA perspective or competent authority from the European Union is the clinical evaluation. So you don't have to have a clinical evaluation, but you can still have a clinical development plan, and you can still have a draft of the clinical evaluation. You can draft your clinical evaluation, but you don't have to have it sign off. Yeah. Because the clinical evaluation sign off comes also with the results from the clinical investigation. And at this moment, we don't have a clinical investigation because we are just initiating the clinical investigation. So you have to have a clinical, so you don't have to have a clinical evaluation. You don't have to have a PMCF in place, PMS in place, and everything what it was related with the clinical investigation plan and report. Yeah, so that's from the whole Annex 2 of the MDR, yeah, you have to have everything apart the clinical investigation and clinical evaluation. And then the clinical investigation will be submitted if it's applicable. If it's not applicable for your device, then the milestone 6 is not applicable, obviously. And then we have the latest one, which is before you place on the market, is the clinical evidence and technical documentation submission. So after the clinical investigation, we gathered enough clinical evidence. Hopefully, clinical investigation is done accordingly with the 14155, and the clinical data is gathered lawfully in accordance with the requirements of 14155 and MDR. So again, I'm highlighting the clinical investigation data need to be captured and gathered with two big things. One, standard 14155 and the MDR regulation. Yeah, so these two. Otherwise the clinical data gathered will not be accepted. So you have to look into, this is another mistake, which the company does. They think the clinical investigation data, it's gathered only with the 14155 wrong, because the clinical investigation data need to be gathered with MDR, need to be compliant with the MDR. If it's not compliant with the MDR, then your clinical data is not suffice, will not be, it can't be used for your technical file submission, because the MDR will scrutinize that. The notified body will scrutinize that. I've seen it. They wanted to see it's MDR compliant, not only 14155. So again, shouts there to the manufacturer who wants to do that. They need to have a gap analysis and to make sure their data is compliant with the MDR, not only 14155, and shout out to the manufacturer to inform the clinicians, because the clinicians, they will use only 14155. They will not use MDR. Yeah, so the hospitals, they will use only the standard, not the MDR. So in this time, they will have to use the legal manufacturer. They will have to ensure they will speak with their clinician and to understand they have to use also MDR. So this is another thing which the manufacturer need to understand and needs to help. Yeah, to help the clinicians to gather, also to update the clinical investigation plan and report also with the MDR requirements. Yeah. So the milestone 7, it's actually gathering all these clinical evidence and technical documentation. It's about complete clinical investigation. It's about generate clinical investigation report. It's about finalize design modification, like complete validation, summary, develop PMS and PMCF plan, all of these, like assemble full MDR technical documentation, complete notified body submission package, submit technical documentation to the notified body, support conformity assessment review. So this is the final step before and after submission. So you prepare, you have your clinical data, and now you prepare your technical documentation.
So it's
and then you have the registration. So you want to speak also about so once let's assume you have the CE marking, which again you have to plan ahead because it takes between 6 and 12 months. So let's assume you have the CE marking. Okay, we have the CE marking. That's not enough to place the market on your device on the market. Then we have to plan. We have to plan the fact that if I'm outside of the European Union, we need a European authorizer, EU rep, and we need an importer. And obviously, if you want, you can get a distributor as well if you don't sell it straight to your straight to the hospital. So then you have to prepare. You have to engage an importer, an EU representative. You have to have a mandate with the EU representative. You have to have contracts. You have to ensure that your economic operators fulfill the MDR requirements, Article 11, 12, 13, 14. So you have to do this. So once you engage your EU representative, which actually the EU representative is engaged before, should be engaged before actually you have the CE marking, because you need a SRN number. So in order to get your SRN number, which is the number allocated from the EUDAMED, you have to prior engage your EU representatives, because this is done only if you register in EUDAMED and your registration is reviewed by your by your EU representative, and then is accepted by the competent authority, the competent authority of your EU representative. So now we are talking from the perspective of a legal manufacturer outside of European Union, when you need a EU representative, So if you need a EU representative, this engagement should be before you get the CE mark, because you need the SRN number, and the SRN number, it's only provided if you register in EUDAMED. And in EUDAMED, you have to have a EU representative, because the EU representative verifies the data and confirm, and then is validated by the competent authority from where the EU representative is located. And then you have the importer. Again, you have to have a contract. You have to ensure they are following the MDR requirements. So what else you do? You activate your PMS. You implement the PMCF activities, which is, again, it's a whole process. You have to engage somebody to help you with the PMS activity. You can't do the CE marking. You'll not get the CE marking without showing prior that you have a PMCF already planned. So you have to have the PMCF activities already planned before the CE marking. Again, this is something, it is in the milestone 8, like you can carry on with the PMS, but actually the PMS activity should start planning before the CE mark, because if it's not starting, you'll not be allowed by the notified body. If you're not showing that, what is your plan in regards to the PMS activity, which will be reviewing your surveillance. So important fact for the manufacturer there. Okay, so you establish a user training program. As I said, you register in EUDAMED, which is okay. Okay, so if we want to sell it in the UK and we are outside of UK, you have to register with the MHRA in order to be able to place your device on the market. And then annually you have to renew your registration. But you also need a representative, in the same way you would need a European representative in Europe. if you are outside of the UK and you want to sell it in UK. And then that's about it. If you have your CE marking, and then if you have your registration done with the MHRA, and if you have also the PMS activities, because if you have procedure updated with the UK legislation law when it's about the PMS activity, because UK has a different law when it's about the PMS and vigilance. So you have to update your procedures, your MDR procedures. You have to update with the UK requirements. So if you have the PMS, if you have the registration, if you have the UK representative, you can actually start engaging distributors or whatever channel you want to sell your product. You are ready to place on the market. If you are from UK, for example, and you want to sell it in Europe, and you have CE marking already, then you have to register with EUDAMED. You have to engage a EU representative, as we previously mentioned. You have to have an importer. And if you want not to sell straight to the hospitals, then you have to engage distributor. You have to have all contracts in place. And then you have to register, as I said, with EUDAMED, and to annually review your data in EUDAMED, because it's a requirement to do so. And that's about it. If you are in Europe, if you are a country from Europe who has a CE marking, then you don't need an importer, you don't need the EU representative, you need probably a distributor if you don't want to sell it straight to the hospitals. Another thing to mention with the European countries, that be careful, because some of the countries, they have alongside with the MDR requirements, they have their own national requirements in regard with registration. What I experimented so far, I can say that Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, they have also extra requirement when it's about the registration. So it's not only EUDAMED registration, you have to register with their competent authorities. So these countries need extra steps when it's about registration. So apart of that, I think we kind of covered everything. Remember, it's not enough the CE marking to have the certificate. Once you have the CE marking, you have to keep going with your PMS valence. You have to look to the vigilance, to be vigilant. Like I said, you have to carry on with your PMCF activities, because this will be monitored by your notified body during the surveillance audit. Then you have your QMS. Obviously, I forgot to mention about the QMS, which is a really important aspect, because in the submission, because we didn't talk about the submission, to be honest. So we talk only that in the milestone 8, you have to submit your documentation, your technical file, and you have to create a summary, a STED, and to submit to your notified body. But we haven't discussed about in depth about what you need to do in order to get the CE marking, because it's not only enough to have a technical file. You will be audited for the QMS MDR, which is part of Article 10 of the MDR. So you will have an audit from the notified body to ensure your quality management system is prepared and is ready for and you have a compliant quality management system which support your all design and development, and support the fact that your manufacturing comply with the standard. And in the end of the day, it's about the safety of the patient, and all your devices are manufactured in a safe way to be used by the patients. So that's the key. The key is the patient safety. And a notified body need to ensure you follow everything what is accordingly to the law, like 1345 MDR, to make sure your device is safe to be used with the patient.
Maria, do you want to go in to talk about the specific case that you have worked on?
I mean, this is for I will just give you like a quick overview of a case study. For example, if you would have like a device which is give me a second which is sold in US. So let's give an example of a UK based company. UK based company, because we have a lot of UK companies who sells the product in US and not on the EU market, only because the regulatory environment and the regulatory are less strict than the MDR. The way to the information needed to be able to place on the market is less strict than MDR. I'm not saying that it's the same information, obviously, it would be on the MDR, but it's not that many requirements, especially when it's about the clinical, because that's where the difference is. It's the clinical evaluation and clinical data, which is more comprehensive with MDR rather than FDA. So, because FDA, they have different pathways to the market, and the one who makes the difference is the equivalence pathway. A lot of companies prefer to start with the US market, because they find that on the US market it is already a device which is equivalent with their device, but their device, like the device they want to sell it and to manufacture, to place on the US market, they have a few extra features, but it's quite similar with something that with a device which is already there. They think that's much easier because they don't need that much clinical data, because it's accepted by the US by the FDA to go with an equivalence with. So if your device is already with a technical data, that whatever technical data they have from the equivalence, right? So they understand already the device they already have in their database, and they make kind of equivalence with your device. So if your device is exactly similar with their whatever they have in their database, they think like, okay, you are actually bringing something similar. So if you can prove that your device is similar with the device we already have in database, they give you a clearance. It is called 510K. So that's kind of a mechanism of a 510K equivalence with the FDA. And a lot of UK companies, they think that this is a much easier way, because their devices are equivalent with those devices and they can demonstrate equivalence. So let's get an example of a 510K clear device. Let's say 510K a clear device on US market would be MDR class 2B. Let's take a software as a standalone, for, I don't know, let's say heart failure, heart failure software as a standalone, which in US is a 510K cleared, and in Europe would be a class 2B under Rule 11. So what is the commercial objective? Objective is to get the CE marking and to penetrate the EU market access. So what is the key challenge? So the key challenge is that one of the things is that you have to have ISO 13485. So one of the things which is good, but this is something new, it comes in force in February this year, is that the old 21 CFR 820, which is the quality management, was the quality management regulation, FDA, QSR, quality system regulation. Now from February, FDA adopted ISO 13485, so that will make easier for the company who has FDA to come on the EU market, because now they have to have 1345. So having 1345, it's actually how to say, easiest way, now to be able to fulfill the Article 10 of the MDR, because prior to the new requirements from FDA, because until now they didn't have the FDA wouldn't recognize 1345. They will have their own system, quality management system. But luckily, from February, FDA recognized 1345. So now companies who sell in US, they can come in Europe with a 1345 already in place. So that it's a good thing, because it's kind of strike off one of the checklists having to have a 1345. Yeah. So now this is not a challenge anymore from the QMS perspective, because the companies who are having 510K clearance, they have to have QMS MDR prepared. Even though the fact that you have 1345, it doesn't imply you are already compliant with Article 10 of MDR. So this is something that the company need to look into. So having 1345 doesn't mean you are compliant with Article 10. So you have to have a gap analysis into the QMS MDR requirements, because this is going to be an assessment of your QMS to make sure you are QMS MDR requirement. So one of the challenge, the gaps. So one is a QMS gap. Yeah, you have to ensure that your quality management system is MDR compliant, QMS MDR compliant. So you have to conduct a QMS gap assessment to align with Article 10 MDR. Yeah. So you have to implement QMS MDR. You have to add, you will see, you have to add PMS processes, PMCF procedures, clinical evaluation process, vigilance process, regulatory strategy and intelligence, add economic operations and UDAMED procedures. So this is something that a manufacturer who operates on US market, they wouldn't have this. So this is new. So all these procedures, translation procedures as well. So this is something that you wouldn't see in the quality management system of device which is placed on the US market. Yeah. So one is to conduct a QMS gap assessment, bring it aligned to Article 10, create new procedures. Yeah. So you have to achieve, if you don't have 1345 certification, you have to achieve, because this is another thing which the US market devices, they don't have ISO 1345 certification, even though they are complying with the 1345. Yeah, this is kind of it's a bit, how to say, maybe some of the legal company manufacturers, they wouldn't understand. But so you have 1345 because the FDA recognized the 1345, and they, how to say, transpose 1345 in the QMSR, which is mandatory now, but they don't have certification for that. Yeah. So they are doing, the FDA, they do audits like inspection to ensure now the manufacturer, they do follow the 1345 because they incorporated, but the manufacturer, they are not required to get a proper certification, an audit. You know, when you choose an accreditation company and audit your 1345, and they give you the certificate, ISO 1345 certification. So all these companies from the like UK or in Europe who sells on FDA, who sells on a US market, they don't have certification. But for MDR, it's kind of a key information to have, a key certificate to have. So you have to achieve ISO 13485 certification before the MDR submission. Yeah, especially because you have a high class. It's a class 2B. So you have to have ISO 13485 certification to be able to demonstrate your device is safe. Yeah. So that will take time and planning, because the whole process of ISO 13485 certification takes 6-7 months at least, depending on the disponibility of the accreditation body. Yeah. So it takes planning and it takes time to do the 13485. So that's one of the challenges, let's say, of US legal manufacturer, UK legal manufacturer, yeah, who wants to sell it on European market. So one of the gap is the QMS 13485 certification, yeah. Then we have another gap is the clinical evaluation, because again, I'm saying that if you go on the US market, you don't need the clinical evaluation, yeah, because you need clinical data if it's a PMA. Let's not get it wrong there, that you don't need clinical data if you go on a US market. I didn't say that. I said that if your device is similar with another device which is on the US market, you can claim equivalence, and that's your pathway route. If you have a PMA, if you have a novel device, if it's a PMA, a high-risk device, class 3, then you need clinical data. You will not be able to go on the US market without clinical data, so you have to do a clinical investigation. Yeah, depending on the pathway route you are choosing. So the example, the case study, so we are talking about only about 510K equivalence. Yeah. So the second gap is the clinical evaluation. Because we follow 510K clearance, we rely largely on the substantial equivalence and not on the clinical data. So in this case, if you go in on the US EU market, you have to create a clinical evaluation. Let's just assume you are already for a few years in the US and you gather clinical data, because you know that your initial plan, especially because if you are a UK legal manufacturer, you know that one day you will go on. Your plan is to go in Europe as well, and UK. Why not? So then, in 1-2 years, yeah, when you started to sell on US market, you start gathering clinical data, questionnaires, register on US on US. You can either do a PMS, yeah, activity on US market in one of your clinic you are selling your product. So you already gathered the clinical data, because your plan from beginning was to go first on the US market, and then with the clinical data from the US market, you want to leverage for EU market and UK market, yeah? So then the clinical evaluation is just a matter of finding a subcontractor, or maybe you have in-house clinician who can help you to do the clinical evaluation. So you start writing your clinical evaluation, which is, by the way, very costly. So it costs you like from 30 something K to 50, 60, depending of the level and what class is your device. It's higher class, it's more costly, because your clinical evaluation need to be more robust. Yeah. So the second gap is the clinical evaluation. Again, if you already gather information on the US market, it's not that complicated. It's easy to be done. It's just about, it's costly to do the clinical evaluation, yeah? So you have to expand literature review, add real-world performance data, updated benefit risk assessment, and prepare an MDR compliant CR, yeah? Then you have to have a PMCF strategy. Again, I'm saying, and I'm coming back to the PMCF, during the CE marking, before the submission, you have to plan your PMCF strategy, because this will be reviewed by your notified body to see what is your plan. So you have to develop a PMCF plan, a PMCF evaluation report template. Yeah, you have to share how your report will be. You have to have user feedback collection process. You have to have a clinical performance monitoring metrics. You have to involve a third party to perform the PMCF activities. So a company who will do this instead of you, or you can have it in-house. Yeah. So then you have to write your clinical investigation justification, because you don't do a clinical investigation because you have your real clinical data already gathered from your PMS activity on US market. So then you have to have labeling and MDR claims. So if you want to add extra claims, it's really hard because you will need to have clinical data, which might not be supported by your clinical data from the US market. So you have to stick to the claims you already have, or you have to start thinking that, okay, do I want to do a clinical investigation in UK, for example, yeah, or in Europe, if I want to expand my claims. If you don't want to do a clinical investigation, then stick to your claims and use your clinical data you already have, yeah. But what you have to do is to change the labeling. That's have to do. You can't go further without this, because you have to follow the GSPR. You have to follow the GSPR section 23. You have to update your IFU with the symbols and all the MDR requirements, to be honest. Another thing which you have to do is your GSPR documents, because under the FDA, yeah, requirements, you don't have to have a GSPR, but here you have to fulfill with Annex 1 of the GSPR, yeah. So then, so you have labeling, you have PMCF, you have clinical evaluation, you have QMS. Then you have to think about the economic operators, depending of if you are a UK manufacturer, you want to sell it in Europe, so you need to think from your representative importers, and you have to think about the registration in UNAM. And we already been through that, so we know all the steps we have to have with the economic operators. And then you have to have, as I said, from the usability point of view, you already have the data. You can use your usability data to your technical file, your whatever usability you had on US market, but you have to ensure that your usability data correspond with the MDR requirements. Again, is another thing to consider. So I think that's about it. So the most scrutinized, to be honest, is the clinical evidence. That's definitely scrutinized. How you validate your methodology, yeah, your PMCF strategy, because it's a software, you would be scrutinized with the cybersecurity control, software lifecycle documentation, clinical evaluation methodology. So, how to say, a cost-effective registration strategy, I would say, is that as an advice, you have to conduct a thorough MDR gap assessment before approaching a notified body, including, as I said, Article 10, including the GSPR, including Annex 2, including clinical evaluation, yeah, from MDR, including clinical investigation where you have to give a rationale why you don't do the clinical investigation, yeah. So you have to build ISO 13485 early because it takes time. Leverage FDA evidence, but do not assume it satisfies MDR requirements. It's nothing like to say take it granted, because it's not like that. But that's why we do the clinical evaluation to understand. So don't start initially like saying if you have FDA evidence will be enough and satisfy MDR requirement, because it's not like that. Not until you do all the gap analysis needed. Gap analysis to the clinical investigation, gap analysis to the clinical evaluation, gap analysis to the GSPR, gap analysis, to do the GSPR, to look into the Article 10 of the QMS MDR, to look into the like vigilance, like PMS. So all these are specific for MDR. So all these are specific for MDR, and you wouldn't pass, you wouldn't have a successful CE marking submission if you think that if you have FDA, it's okay. No, you still need to look to the MDR. So take one by one every annex, like declaration of conformity. I didn't talk about the declaration conformity. You have to have a declaration conformity in here. With the FDA, you don't have to have it. It's your choice if you want to sign off a declaration of conformity. With the MDR, you have to have a declaration of conformity, and you have to follow the requirements. Yeah. You have to have a CE marking. The CE marking need to be in a particular way. So you have to look, every annex from MDR need to be looked into. And alongside with the annexes, we have the MDCG guidance, which helps you to create PSUR template, PMS template if you're a class 1, a PMCF template. So we have so many MDCG's guidance which can help us to understand the MDR requirements. It's true that having the FDA, having a technical file already in place, it makes our life easier if we want to go on the Europe market or UK market, But it doesn't mean comply with the MDR requirements. You still need to do all these gap analysis to understand the requirements. So you still have to go to one by one every single annex and to understand, okay, do I have this? Okay, do I have the GSPR? No. So then we have to do it. Go to Annex 2, technical file. So I have to do a proper technical file submission, the same in the same way you would do the FDA submission. Only that FDA, they have their own submission, and it's E-Star. Here we have a technical file submission, and you have to do PDF depending of your own notified body. For example, they are notified body who says, okay, you upload all your documentation in my portal, or they are notified body who says you make them PDF and you send me in this SharePoint. So they are different notified body with a different way to work with their customers. But what is important, and again I'm saying, it's really important to take the whole MDR and looking for each annex and to understand the requirements, because it's a different requirements from FDA. It's true, you have the technical file, you have verification, validation, you already sell it. But it doesn't mean you can sell it on the EU market. You still have to add extra documentation to your technical file. So your FDA technical file would not support EU technical file for submission. Nope. There are so missing. There are so many missing. So many gaps. There are so many gaps which you have to fill. Well, I mean that's about it. But the whole process, realistic, is 12 to 18 months. I don't think if somebody thinks that they can do earlier than that, I don't think it's achievable, especially because they don't have 1345. And because they don't have 1345, I'm saying, like, truly saying that it's the 1345. To achieve 1345, you need at least 6 months, because from stage 1 to stage 2 you have to have, so once the 1345, so think you have 1345 ready. Let's say I am a US or UK, which was selling, UK manufacturer which sells devices in on US market. I have 1345, but it's not certified. If it's not certified, then you have to involve an accreditation body. That accreditation body, you will plan it today for in 2 months, for example. Let's say they give you in a 2 months time. Okay, so from the day you have the stage 1 to the stage 2 or 1345 takes 3 months. Because from stage 1 to stage 3, you have to gather evidence. Then the stage 2 happen, or 1345 stage 2 happen. And then all this process from stage 1 to stage 2, it's at least 6 months, because you don't find an available straight away after stage 1. Yeah, so you have to do all the findings to conform to work to all the findings, and then to plan another visit, the stage 2. Yeah, and only after the stage 2, if you have findings, you need to resolve your findings. Yeah, and then to think about the QMS MDR. Yeah, so it's a bit of planning. Let's say planning. That's the key word, planning. You have to plan accordingly. And to be sure you take into consideration all the facts, how long a gap analysis takes, how long the GSPR takes, yeah, how long a clinical evaluation takes. So make a good timeline and an achievable and realistic timeline.
Well, thank you. Well, this is a very comprehensive and practical insights. Maria, thank you for sharing your boots on the ground perspective with us today, and especially the case study. And for everyone listening or reading the transcript, we'll be featuring ETMP Consultancy as a very specialist firm on the ElendiLabs platform. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on the platform. And if you haven't checked our website, please head to elendilabs.com. Be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn.